And a hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 68 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me here on this Thursday early evening in New York. If you're checking out episode 68 on the YouTube channel and haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. Or if you're catching episode 68 on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. If you're enjoying the content, haven't done so already, click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. So the Oscar nominations for films released in 2023 have been announced, and there's controversy every year. And what I'm going to talk about, or at least to start, is the controversy surrounding Barbie. But for people who don't know, there is controversy every year. And you go back decades, you go back to the 70s, you go back to the 60s, there's always controversy with the Oscar nominations when they're announced. The difference is now, given the interconnectedness of where we are in 2024, and that's not a criticism, that's a 1 + 1 = 2, everything is amplified. So that's not to say that there are not good points to make, but when people get overheated, understand that almost every year, there's fighting, there's arguing, there's how the fuck did this person get skipped? Why didn't this person get nominated? This one's going to win for sure. The Oscars are bullshit. This is every single year. And I could give you chapter and verse. You want to ask questions in the comments, the kind of stuff that you can't find on Google. It'd be very difficult. I don't even know how you would Google something like that. But there are years where we remember, oh yeah, that everybody thought was going to win Best Picture, or how the fuck did this guy win, or why didn't she win, or how did they not get nominated? How did they get skipped? You know, as a fan of Paul Giamatti, I talked about in the podcast on his movie, The Holdovers, for which he may actually be the betting favorite to win Best Actor this year or for films released in 2023. Giamatti got hosed at least twice, if not more, where he should have been nominated for lead actor, American Splendor, 100%. It's absurd that he wasn't nominated. Could have been nominated for Sideways. Could have been nominated for Cinderella Man. And there are other movies. Hell, Man on the Moon. He's phenomenal as Andy Kaufman's sidekick, Bob Zmuda. So there's always that. There are times where when you say, oh, it's a popularity contest, and then there are super popular people or people who appear to be shoo-ins who don't win. So that's baseball, Susan. That's the Oscars. So I'm the person to try to lower the temperature to point out, hey, this might be bullshit, but it's par for the course. And there's nothing new. This is not anything different for the Motion Picture Academy, which, you know, the membership, of course, just continues to change year to year as the older members pass or resign from the Academy due to age or whatever it might be. So the main point of contention, just to kind of start this, is Greta Gerwig, who is popular with the Academy, I should point out. She has been nominated for Best Director before. So this is not a situation of, you know, a woman who is being sort of cast aside and they don't respect her. No, they simply, whoever voted, however many people, her name didn't come up as much as the nominees when people were presumably asked to list their nominees. In other words, I'm not seeing a conspiracy in this particular instance. And the same with Margot Robbie not being nominated for Barbie. Although I admit 100%, you're not going to get any counter argument from me. It doesn't look good that Ryan Gosling is the one who is nominated. I love Ryan Gosling, but it doesn't look good. It seems to be confirming the point that the movie was making all along. Oh, you know, Ryan Gosling, I am Knuff. He was Knuff and is Knuff for an Oscar nomination, but Margot Robbie didn't get there, and neither did the filmmaker, who obviously, you know, I wasn't a huge fan of her film Lady Bird that she did, but she's a prodigious talent. She's tremendous. You know, like I could say, I remember the first time I saw Lost in Translation, speaking of super talented female filmmakers who were very successful, Sofia Coppola. Lost in Translation didn't hit the first time I saw it. And then the second time I thought it was the best film of its year. And I was flabbergasted. Well, it was the year of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. So what? I mean, come on. I wanted her to win for director, and I wanted her movie Lost in Translation. I thought it was the best film of that year. But that's beside the point. it's absurd that Gosling is the one who gets nominated and he might win, and that Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie weren't, but I'm not seeing a conspiracy, because the reality is, and a lot of people who follow this and who have seen most of the movies nominated, because nowadays, when I was back in my day, it used to be 5 slots for Best Picture, for example, and now it's 10. When you look at the strength of the 10 movies, and I haven't, I've only seen a few of them. I have yet to see The Zone of Interest. I haven't seen Anatomy of a Fall. I haven't even seen, just in general, I haven't seen Maestro yet. It was a very deep year across the board, from the films, from directors doing tremendous work, from performances, costume design, production design, effects work. There is so much great work that was done in 2023. I'm not seeing a conspiracy. And in this case, I'm not seeing incompetence or deliberate, willful neglect or disregard of somebody, dereliction of duty. I'm just seeing choices being made which maybe we don't agree with. And, going back through time with the Oscars, which is really what I'm going to do here, to point out different controversies and times that everybody knew what was going to happen and maybe it did, and everybody knew what was going to happen and it didn't. There's no way to predict. Guys like Steven Spielberg can come pretty close to figuring out who's going to win what, because of the number of people they know. If Steven Spielberg below the table asks a bunch of people, he can do his own version of exit polling, and he can pretty much say, okay, I think this is going to win Best Picture. In 2006, he was probably pretty sure that Scorsese, for films released that year, was going to win for The Departed. I'm sure he was very happy about that. But going back through time, there's a lot of, if you want to call it cinematic injustice, where people should have been nominated and weren't, or should have won and didn't, or shouldn't have won and did. I can give you chapter and verse. I remember at the 97 Oscars, films released in 96, and I've discussed those Oscars previously. That was the Oscars of Fargo and The English Patient. And Lauren Bacall, who is an iconic, legendary name, and she was still working, obviously, otherwise there'd be no controversy with her. But Lauren Bacall was a Hollywood star in her teens. She worked with, Humphrey Bogart in the early 40s, and then she married Bogart, and she survived she actually survived the Red Scare and the fucking HUAC hearings and Joe McCarthy. She managed to get past all that. And she gave a really solid performance in a movie that wasn't that good. And I'm a Barbra Streisand fan. But Lauren Bacall was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for movie The Mirror Has Two Faces, which it's just not that good of a movie. But the idea was, it's Bacall, this is her time, she has to win, she's a legend. And then she didn't win. She lost to Juliette Binoche from The English Patient, which, the joke was that everything English Patient was going to win that year, and pretty much did. It ended up winning 9. But objectively speaking, if people were not making predictions or saying it's really Lauren's time, Binoche was in a better movie and gave a more rounded performance and deserved it. And I think she's marvelous in that film, for whatever that's worth. Now, you go back 10 years before that, and Paul Newman in The Color of Money, with opposite a very young Tom Cruise. Now, Newman had not won Best Actor. He had been nominated a number of times, and it was generally regarded, even at that point, in 1986, where Paul Newman would have been 61, 62, in that ballpark. He was already discussed as the finest thespian to never win an Oscar. See, Newman was a bit of a unicorn because he looked like a leading man. He had the acting skills of a leading man. He had been in a number of huge box office hits. He was massively popular in the industry, really, until he passed. You'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who dragged Paul Newman or thought, Newman's a piece of shit. He was just an all-around, I believe he was exactly what he appeared to be. One of the most charitable people to ever work in the movie business, the Newman's Own brand that you still see in stores. Newman was nominated for Martin Scorsese's The Color of Money, which is technically a sequel to the 1961 film called The Hustler, with extraordinary cast, including Newman, Jackie Gleason, and George C. Scott. Piper Laurie, among others. Newman was nominated for Best Actor in a movie that Tom Cruise is essentially the driving force. Newman is in a reactive role. It is not a Best Actor role or performance, if you ask me. But it was general sense, and this is reading that I've done, it was Newman's time and he was going to win, and he did win. He did win. He won Best Actor, and that's literally his sole Best Actor win. And that amounted to a kind of lifetime or career achievement award. Not everybody wins. Cary Grant, his Oscar is a lifetime achievement award. But I can pick any number of films where even within the kind of range and confines of Cary Grant playing Cary Grant, doesn't matter. Nobody did it better than Cary Grant. And you want to go back and relitigate? The fact that he wasn't nominated for North by Northwest is a fucking crime in 1959. The fact he wasn't nominated for His Girl Friday. What? How is that possible? How is he not nominated for Bringing Up Baby? That might be one of the single greatest comedic performances given by an actor in a movie. And Cary did not even get a fucking nomination. And then in the Philadelphia Story, it's his movie. And James Stewart walks away with the Best Actor Oscar. Like, what the fuck is that? So if that kind of thing happened now, if you had a movie with three huge stars on the level, and even though they were, young at the time, they're not the old heads that we think of. Cary Grant, James Stewart, Katharine Hepburn. A similar thing would be a movie when Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt were maybe 30 and Julia Roberts. And you have a movie with the three of them where Tom Cruise is driving the story, but Brad Pitt wins Best Actor and Katharine Hepburn at least gets a nomination for Best Actor. Not Katharine Hepburn, Julia Roberts. You say, this is fucking bullshit. So again, there's so much within the narrow range of whoever gives a shit who gets nominated or who wins which Oscar. There's so much injustice. Now, just as a fan, and my favorite decade, and what I believe to be the greatest decade for movies, is the 90s. And I'll tell you, stories and people of my age who are, in that bracket, who are movie fans, can confirm similar kinds of things. I remember years where I saw none of the movies or what didn't have a stake in the game, so to speak. I really didn't give a shit. The issue with the Barbie and now Oppenheimer, and there's going to be a lot of pissed off people if Paul Giamatti ends up winning Best Actor, even though almost everyone who has seen the holdovers is saying, wow, what a fucking movie. But they're saying, yes, Giamatti does something different. Yes, he's been brilliant repeatedly and gotten the short end of it. But this is Murphy's time for what he did in Oppenheimer. There's going to be a lot of pissed off people, but not people within the movie industry, because from what I understand, Paul Giamatti is hugely popular. I mean, even Howard Stern, of all people, went totally out of his way to talk about how great the guy is, and how when they made Private Parts all those years ago, he said, I did a lot of scenes with him and I didn't understand. It wasn't clicking for me just how good this guy was, how prepared he was. Yeah, he's a nice guy. We're screwing around between takes, but when they yelled action, I didn't know that it wasn't normal for a guy to be as good as this, delivering lines and interacting with you while the cameras were rolling. So Giamatti, just on that, he's got a chance, and he's won a number of the early awards. He won the Critics' Choice. We saw him on TV making jokes a few weeks back. He won the Golden Globe. We'll just have to see how that goes. But for example, looking back on the Oscars of Dances with Wolves for films released in 1990, defeating Goodfellas, and Kevin Costner defeating Martin Scorsese for Best Picture, I hadn't seen either of the movies at the time, and I was 17 when those Oscars happened. I was a little surprised, but I wasn't like, fuck this fucking bullshit, fucking Oscars bullshit. No, I didn't say anything like that. I can tell you, though, the following year, I had seen a number of the movies. I hadn't seen JFK, which I absolutely love, and I'll stand on my head. I believe JFK is Oliver Stone's best film, as much as at least a third of it is gobbledygook. It's all nonsense, but cinematically, JFK is extraordinary. It has some scenes in it that are unlike anything you'll ever see. But the 92 Oscars were the Oscars of Silence of the Lambs, and I had seen it. It's a movie I respect, but I don't really like. I have that uneasiness watching it, as I do with two of Scorsese's best films, Raging Bull and Goodfellas, the same sense of, yeah, it's a great movie, but I don't want to ever watch. No, I don't want to see it. I'm uncomfortable watching this. Even me. I don't want to watch this again. I loved, underline, exclamation point, Barry Levinson's Bugsy, which got a shit ton of Oscar nominations in the year of Silence of the Lambs. It may have gotten the same or more total nominations because of all the technical categories. It's a period piece. I was really upset. Number one, that Warren Beatty did not win Best Actor over Anthony Hopkins. I love Anthony Hopkins. How can you not? Another absolute legend, extraordinary talent, still doing great work as we speak. You know, even as he's well into his 70s, his 80s, he's an extraordinary thespian. Sir Anthony Hopkins, or Sir Tony, as Tom Hanks always calls him. I get such a kick out of it. Oh, Sir Tony. But Warren Beatty, who is also a prodigious talent, and, you know, he's got kind of always had a reputation of being the ultimate Lothario and all that. But in a similar vein to how I was aggravated that Jeffrey Rush ended up winning the Best Actor in a year where Tom Cruise just annihilated everything in Jerry Maguire, and I believe should have won Best Actor for that role. Jeffrey Rush's small, relatively speaking, performance, they gave him the Best Actor award. It was a supporting part. Anthony Hopkins is bone-chilling, I can admit that, as Hannibal Lecter. And I'm a fan of Brian Cox, who played Lecter, you know, a number of years earlier in Manhunter, which was an adaptation of Red Dragon, which Anthony Hopkins and Edward Norton redid during, you know, the 2000s. I don't know, was it 2002 or 3? I don't remember the exact year. But Hopkins is great. He could have won Best Supporting Actor. And then, okay, Jack Palance wouldn't have won for City Slickers, and there wouldn't have been all that kind of goofiness between Jack Palance and Billy Crystal. Many people say that the 92 Oscars were the most entertaining Oscars ever because of the interplay of Jack Palance and his City Slickers co-star, Billy Crystal, who hosted the Oscars that year. But I was upset. I wanted Warren Beatty to win. And I thought Bugsy was the best film of 1991. Well, actually, Grand Canyon, which wasn't nominated for Best Picture. That's Lawrence Kasdan's just extraordinary ensemble film, which came out in the fall of 1991. I would say that and Bugsy and JFK are all tied for the Best Picture released in 1991. Now, the following year, 1992, or films released in 92, I was rooting very hard for Clint Eastwood and Unforgiven to win. And that was a time and that year where all the prognosticators got it right. They all said, we're hearing that Clint is winning this by a wide margin, that it's not even close. Like, nobody in Hollywood is saying anything other than Clint's taken home Best Director and Best Picture. And I remember at those Oscars, there had been some controversy the previous year that I was just talking about with Silence and JFK and Bugsy. Barbra Streisand made movie a really solid adaptation of a book my father was a huge fan of, Pat Conroy's The Prince of Tides. And The Prince of Tides was a good movie. I don't think it was an Oscar-level film. Again, if you're only nominating 5. But Barbara, there was a lot of talk, should have been nominated for Best Director. She didn't get nominated for Best Director. This is not, again, Greta Gerwig now being responsible for this unbelievable pop culture phenomenon. It was a good movie, and Streisand directed it very well. It's not the same thing. But the Academy had Barbara the following year announce, and this is prestigious, anytime somebody gets the opportunity to announce Best Director or Best Picture, they don't let just anyone do that. Sometimes it's whoever won Best Director the previous year, but sometimes they just pick somebody. And Barbara was given the honor of bestowing the Best Picture winner, and she took it. She knew Clint was winning. She had a look on her face as she was opening the envelope that she didn't need to open the envelope. And when she announced Clint as winner, it was great. I was so excited and so happy. And then I knew that it was going to win Best Picture. But that's a situation and a circumstance where the chalk ended up coming true. But you just don't know. And I don't think it's because they want people to watch or, they want the eyeballs in front of the seats. It's just the way that it goes. Because when you have a shit ton of people voting, they can change their mind. They can even do a little misdirection and say, well, I voted for so-and-so, and they actually didn't vote for so-and-so. They voted for someone else. And I remember I hadn't seen Braveheart when Braveheart took the major hardware at the Oscars in 96 for films released in 95. But when I did see Braveheart, I didn't have a problem with it winning. Although if you ask me what's the best movie made in 1995, I'm going to say Apollo 13. But Braveheart, for what it achieved technically, artistically, creatively, no problem. Gibson did it again. He's a great director, as much as he might be completely off his rocker. He is a supremely talented filmmaker, and he came up with some camera tricks and some editing ideas and some staging that really hadn't been done before. And he talked about taking, not taking notes, but that he used Kubrick's Spartacus for inspiration, and to some extent Ben-Hur, the 1950s one with Heston, but more so Spartacus in terms of how he envisioned the battle scenes in his head, and comparing some of the long shots in Spartacus to those in Braveheart melted it better. You know, Kubrick was somewhat limited. He wasn't making that kind of a movie as Mel was, the sort of bloody, brutal, nonstop battle scenes and double crosses and romance and, you know, all this. But I do remember, you'd think that I would have been pissed off the year that Saving Private Ryan lost Best Picture to Shakespeare in Love. And it's interesting. I still maintain that Shakespeare in Love was not an unworthy Best Picture winner, but a lot of people disagree with me. Like you see now, and you can Google this too, least worthy Best Picture Oscar winners, and they're saying Shakespeare in Love, not because it's a bad film, but because how in the hell did it beat out Saving Private Ryan for Best Picture? I'm a fan of Saving Private Ryan. It's not my favorite war film. I think it makes my top 5, but I had seen both movies and I was not angry. I was happy that Spielberg took Best Director. I thought that would have been a travesty given what he did, what he was able to achieve, the realism, putting the audience right in the middle of the battle. That was a rare time where I almost walked out of the theater during that opening where Tom Hanks's group lands on the beach at Normandy and just basically gets fucking carved up by the gunners. They are getting eviscerated and everybody is getting shot. Everybody's dying horrible deaths, screaming, yelling for their moms. It's so bad. I was this close to walking out of the theater. That is how intense, how visceral, how scary it was. I mean, I was practically ducking in my seat, listening to the sound of the gunshots going right over my head. That's where surround sound was not so good. It was freaking me out. But I remember also in the year of Titanic, which was the year before Saving Private Ryan, and the year after The English Patient and Fargo, which was early 1998, films released in 97. That was probably the year that I saw the most nominated movies, performances, etc. And I was already a huge James Cameron fan. I felt that it was a crime that Terminator 2 didn't get more Oscar nominations than it did. You want to, man, like, how do you compare direction? For example, if people are going to say that Terminator 2 within the realm of an action movie is as good as it gets, even watching it now, going back in time, Terminator 2 is like one of the greatest movies ever made. And I would say that Aliens, James Cameron's 1986 film, is also one of the greatest movies ever made. How does one compare the direction in Silence of the Lambs to Terminator 2? How? You can't. But if somebody had told, you want to rerun the 1992 Oscars for films released in 91, I'm picking James Cameron. It's not even close. The staging, what he was able to do, the seamlessness of the special effects in Terminator 2, the way that it's a combine of old school CGI, which still looks good, and practical effects and incredible stunt work. Everything was right on the button in that movie. So I was already this huge fan of James Cameron. I loved the first Terminator. I wasn't, and as I say, I loved Aliens in whatever version, theatrical version, extended cut. It's still an incredible film. I prefer the longer cut of Aliens because then you get into, it makes more sense why Ripley has such a kinship with the little girl, because she remembers her own daughter. And in the theatrical cut, that entire plot point is discarded with, and I feel like it's to the film's detriment. But that's neither here nor there. I was already a huge James Cameron fan. I love True Lies. And Titanic isn't perfect. If you want me to say that from a craftsmanship, from a story, from a total performance perspective, LA Confidential is a better movie. I'm not going to fight you on it. I mean, I don't have Titanic in my James Cameron top 3. It's probably 4th or 5th. maybe it's even fifth, because the director's cut of The Abyss has got to be in there. I would almost argue that's the best film he ever made, next to Aliens and Terminator 2. And I might even put it on par with those. That's how good the director's cut of The Abyss is. But at those Oscars, I had seen LA Confidential. I had seen As Good as It Gets. I had seen Wag the Dog. I had seen Yuli's Gold. I had watched almost every movie that was up for a lot of awards. The Rainmaker, the John Grisham adaptation by Coppola, Good Will Hunting, The Sweet Hereafter by Adam McGoyan, a filmmaker that I studied in significant detail a few years earlier at New York University. I had seen almost everything, and I was pulling for James Cameron and Titanic. And I again, similar to the chatter with Clint Eastwood years earlier, what was coming out of Hollywood is that despite the flaws, nobody thought that James Cameron was going to pull that off. There were people who were actively rooting for him to fail. And he succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. Now, again, the success of movies like Barbie and Oppenheimer from 2023, it's not the same thing. I don't think people were expecting Barbie to bomb or Oppenheimer to bomb. But the issue with Titanic was the cost overruns, the time overruns, the budget overruns. The fact that it made so much fucking money. It was James Cameron's time to win, and he did. And I rejoiced, even though I loved LA Confidential and all those other movies. Adam McGoyan's The Sweet Hereafter was one of the best films of the year. I was a huge fan of Jack. I was okay that Jack won Best Actor for As Good as It Gets. I was kind of pulling for Dustin Hoffman. What he did in Wag the Dog was phenomenal. And I love Robert Duvall, even though the movie The Apostle I thought was overrated. That wasn't very good. But it is part of the movie-going experience if you're into the Oscars. See, I don't really watch the Oscars. I haven't really watched the show since the year that Scorsese won for The Departed. I'm not that interested, but I love the history of it. I love the Oscars history, even though I don't have everything memorized, and I know people who do, like who won in what year going back to the 50s or 60s or what have you. But it's not an arbiter of somebody's career. Alfred Hitchcock had one movie, Rebecca, which won a Best Picture. How did Alfred Hitchcock not win a Best Director Oscar? I mean, give me a fucking break. Hitchcock was the greatest. Hitchcock and Kubrick, 1 and 1A. You're going to ask me who had the greatest imprint on filmmaking in terms of their total output, in terms of the influential nature? So Orson Welles, you could say, was the most influential, but he only had the one, 2 or 3 masterpieces. He had Citizen Kane, he had Magnificent Ambersons, which was stolen from him, and they're still looking for the uncut version, the 2 hour and 20 plus minute version of Ambersons. They're never going to find it. They're not finding it. The movie's been gone for 70 years. Where are they going to find it? 70 years? 80 years. They're not going to find it. We're stuck with what we've got. It's good, but the original version, everybody who ever talked about it said it was twice the movie. Said it was at least as good as Citizen Kane, maybe better. And then he had Touch of Evil. But the rest of Welles' career, Hitchcock was the man. Hitchcock was never not the man, all the way to the end. Even a kind of goofy last movie, Family Plot, where his health had really started to go. But the fact that Alfred Hitchcock, who changed Hollywood with Psycho, did not win a Best Director award for that, or for North by Northwest, or for The Trouble with Harry. Well, no, not The Trouble with Harry. Shadow of a Doubt. Or Notorious, or The Man Who Knew Too Much, the original, or The Birds. He was just crushing one great movie after another. He didn't get nominated for Vertigo. He didn't get nominated for Rear Window, or didn't win. I'm not sure of the nominations. But it's not the be-all, end-all. The Oscars are fun, and it's an interesting kind of historical... it's always an interesting historical point to discuss which movies were out in which year and who won what. I'm fascinated by it, but I would never say, this is the best film of the year because this won. No. And the great thing with movies and criticism is celluloid doesn't live forever without being treated. We know this. Movies, from the first half of the 20th century, there are so many films that are just basically lost, that the original negatives were beyond repair. But to me, the joy of movies, I'm not negative. I certainly would never post an angry screed about why so-and-so should have been nominated, or it's disgusting that this person won and not that person. It's not the way my brain works. I'm more of a positive. It's funny because I am pretty damn cynical, but when it comes to movies, I take more of a positive approach, because to me, debate on movies and arguing over who is better, it's fun. It's fantastic. It's the lifeblood of the business when you get down to it, is word of mouth, not just telling people what to see, but what you thought. How did the movie work for you or not work? How did the movie make you feel? And in the case of the controversy right now, if it makes you feel anger that Greta Gerwig was not nominated for Best Director, that's fine. And if it's like, how the fuck does Gosling get nominated but not Margot? It's her movie, for fuck's sake. Also fine. And I could say it's ridiculous. I don't have the anger about it. You can call that a failing. But I love to talk about it. I like to debate it. And if you want to, well, you wouldn't be debating me in the comments, because I'm not really taking a strong position here that this is disgusting or this is not disgusting. But it's part of why we go to the movies. And we have people we root for in general. I've been a Paul Giamatti fan, for example, for more than 25 years, since seeing him, that crazy scene in Donnie Brasco where he and Johnny Depp discussed the word forget about it. Who's that guy? That's Bart Giamatti's son? The former commissioner of baseball? Holy shit. We have people that we root for. And there's nothing wrong with that either. If somebody wants to say from the artistic, technical standpoint, Cillian Murphy, gives a better performance in Oppenheimer than Giamatti does in The Holdovers, therefore he should win, I'm not going to argue with you. But if you're asking me who I want to win, I want Giamatti to win, because I'm a fan. Because I feel like he got shafted. We rewind the clock to 2003. Him not getting nominated for American Splendor is a fucking robbery. That was something I was mad about at the time. A rare moment where I was like, this is bullshit. I didn't have a platform, and this was not the social media era where I could light somebody up. Oh, I'm lighting up the MPAA on Facebook. I wouldn't have done that anyway. But that was a performance of incredible skill and dedication to craft, what Giamatti did in that film. And The Holdovers is his next best performance. And you can, if you watch both, and American Splendor is on is on Max. You'll see what I mean if you're not familiar with American Splendor. It's a story of a real life, kind of underground comic book artist named Harvey Pekar, who ended up becoming a celebrity in his own right. What Giamatti does in that movie is something extra. It's something different than what you normally see from a Hollywood actor, even though that wasn't really an independent film, but it feels like an independent film. But it's all part of the business, and it's all part of the fun and the enjoyment of being a big movie fan, a movie buff. And yes, there are years of the Oscars where you probably haven't heard of any of the films that I've studied a number of them in depth. Not because of the Oscars, but just in general. And then there are movies where I look back, and years where I say, I don't understand how this movie won Best Picture. The Greatest Show on Earth? That's really not a Best Picture kind of film. Hell, even David Niven, Around the World in 80 Days, objectively speaking, should not have won Best Picture. No way. But it did. And I'm not angry about it, but there are those curiosities and those head-scratching nominations and wins, and it's all part of it. And the reality is that Margot Robbie is so talented, her time will come. And mark my words, Greta Gerwig is such a home run hitter as a filmmaker. She has such an incredible eye. Look, I remember when Barbie, when they were talking about it a couple of years ago, I said, this isn't going to work. Nobody gives a shit about Barbie anymore. But they figured out how to do it in a way that most people did not envision was possible. Like it didn't become a huge hit because it sucked. It spoke to a lot of people, and I know people who saw it more than once. I know people who didn't understand the fuss. It was cute, nothing more. I was bored. But to produce a cultural phenomenon, the talent that it takes to do that, it's not an accident. Margot's day will come, and Greta's day will come. And with that, we've reached the end of episode 68 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. Back in the studio after 2 episodes out on the road in the car. But if you've checked out episode 68, on my YouTube channel and you're enjoying the content and just for whatever reason haven't yet clicked like and subscribe and turn on those notifications, please do so. I would greatly appreciate it. Or if you caught up on episode 68 on the audio platforms such as Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, or iHeartRadio, same thing. Click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back real soon with episode 69. Take care, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. Peace.